From the League of Women Voters of Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville, we welcome you to our election coverage for 2016. Tonight we'll be meeting the candidates for mayor of Berkeley. I have just a few my name is Deborah Malbeck. I'm the president of the League, and I will also be reviewing questions, but I'll get to that in a moment. First off, I'd like to give you the standard reminder. Please turn off your cell phones, ringer, anything else that buzzes, hums, clicks, or makes noise, please turn it off. We are recording tonight, and we allow you to take photographs if you wish to, but please no flash, because the recording gets messed up if there's flash going on. The League of Women Voters likes to keep a civil attitude, polite, and we do not interrupt each other, and we do not go into hoots, cheers, boos, hisses, anything like that. Please hold your applause. At the end of the evening, when the whole forum is over, you may applaud all together at once, but no individual applause for candidates. If you want to ask questions, we do have a list of pre-prepared questions that we'll start with, but if you have other questions that you'd like to ask, we have volunteers in the back. Hello, volunteers, wave your hands. The volunteers have a supply of index cards and pencils and pens. If you'd like to ask a question, please get a card from a volunteer. If you hold up your hand and wave it, they'll bring you a card. And write your question on the card, and when it's written, wave it again, and the volunteer will pick it up and they will bring it forward. We don't want to distract our moderator or confuse him by having too many people running around. So I will be the only one giving, or my assistant will be the only one giving questions to the moderator. We also have, at the suggestion of the media people here, they have controls of the microphones. With so many microphones and so many people, if it is not someone's turn to talk, their microphone will be turned off. So we will not be interrupting or talking over each other. Oh, and any questions you ask will be asked of all candidates. So don't give me a card saying that you want to ask one person a particular question. If it doesn't apply to everyone, then we don't ask it. And for the candidates, I'd like to remind you, don't try to look at the moderator while you're answering your questions. The camera and the audience are over there, so that's who you want to be looking at. Okay, so our moderator this evening is Michael Coleman, who's a member of the League from Oakland, an Oakland member, so he does not have a Berkeley bias or bias towards any of the candidates or anything else. Thank you very much for your help, Michael, and you are now in charge.
Thank you very much. And welcome and thank you for being with us tonight for the October 6th Berkeley Mayor Candidates Forum. I'm Michael Coleman with the League of Women Voters of Oakland, a hired gun brought in special for the occasion. The League of Women Voters is a trusted membership organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. We do not endorse or oppose candidates or political parties. The League participates in issue advocacy and voter education. I'd like to remind everybody that the candidates have all agreed to participate under the guidelines set for this forum, and the guidelines are posted outside the room. And Deborah already mentioned a lot of the basic rules, but if you're new to the room, turn off your cameras, your electronic devices, your telephones, and be aware that any campaign literature or other forms of campaigning, such as buttons and t-shirts and signs, are not permitted inside the room. We are videotaping tonight and through Peralta Video, and that they are at P-SPAN. I had to get that spelled out for me. P as in pneumonia, P-SPAN. And that'll be available on YouTube and the broader community to access. There are 8 candidates for this office. Only 6 of them are here tonight. And let's go over a few of the ground rules. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening remarks. The order was determined by the order that they are on the ballot, and that's the way they're seated here. The timekeepers will signal candidates with colored signs marked 30 seconds and stop. As audience members arrived, our volunteers provided cards for submitting written questions. The questions will be screened to avoid duplication and personal attacks. The order of answering the questions will be we will alternate where we start with each candidate, and each one will have 1 minute to respond to each question. And there will be no separate rebuttals. However, the candidates may choose to use some or all of their 1 minute to rebut the response given by another candidate. Following the questions, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Now, let's begin with our first candidate, Chris Worthington.
Thank you, Michael. I have so far introduced over 2,000 city council items, and almost all of them have been approved by the city council. That involved negotiating hundreds of compromises with all the different parts of the city council in order to get that record of getting almost all of them approved. Over my 20 years in office, I have introduced some of the most progressive, visionary legislation in the United States. I've also introduced some of the most boring, mundane, practical, common sense reforms on public safety, economic development, and fiscal responsibility. All of them were important. I have appointed the highest number of Asians and Pacific Islanders, the highest number of Latinos, and the highest number of African Americans. Why do I mention that? Because to me, it's a fundamental moral issue. It's not even political. How can we be in the city of Berkeley and certain council members have appointed 0 or 1 of any particular ethnic group except for white? To me, that's immoral. It's totally unacceptable. Beyond who the politicians appoint, we also have Asians and Latinos who are underrepresented in who gets hired, who gets the millions of dollars in city contracts. And I think when you talk to the voters of Berkeley, they say they value diversity, and yet some of the city council members are doing a good job of reflecting the diversity of the community, and others are doing a horrible job. We need to demand everybody on our city council addresses these kinds of issues and includes everyone in our community. I've also had the joy of working with hundreds of students as interns who wrote those thousands of council items and appointing hundreds of students to city commissions. And those young people have then gone on to become city council members, elected officials, and leaders in our community. I think we need a mayor who can deal with the nuts and bolts of the practical common sense issues, but who can also bring a Berkeley spirit and a Berkeley vision. We need to develop consensus and compromise, as I have done hundreds of times, but we also the consensus and compromise doesn't have to be lowest common denominator. It needs to reflect the values and the spirit of the people of Berkeley. So I'm Chris Worthington, and I approve this message.
Thank you very much. And now Jesse Arguin.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the League for having this opportunity for you to hear from the candidates. You will be making a very important decision, some of you next week and some of you on November 8th. Who you elect as mayor will literally shape the future of this city. And Berkeley faces some critical challenges in the coming years: a housing crisis that is changing the face of our city, the proposed closure of Alta Bates Hospital, which is the only emergency room in the city of Berkeley, crumbling infrastructure, and the need to invest in our parks, our streets, our sidewalks, and improve the physical health of our city, and address the issues of equity in our schools and community. And that is why I'm running for mayor. I love Berkeley. I'm excited about our future. And as mayor, I will continue to lead on economic and social justice, promote equity in our schools and community, improve city services and infrastructure, and advance Berkeley's trailblazing environmental leadership. I'm the son and grandson of farm workers, and I'm a lifelong community advocate. And I've served the Berkeley community for 14 years. I served on the Housing Advisory Commission for 4 years, where I worked to secure funding to create new affordable housing in our community. I chaired the Rent Stabilization Board, where I fought to strengthen eviction protections and money for tenant displacement. And I served on the Zoning Adjustments Board and the Planning Commission, and I helped write our downtown area plan on the Downtown Area Plan Advisory Committee. I bring experience, vision, and a deep dedication to this amazing community. And in my 8 years on the Berkeley City Council, representing the downtown, I've collaborated with every single member of the council and delivered real results on issues that matter to our community. I worked to not only help craft but adopt our downtown plan. I work to save our historic downtown post office, work to raise the minimum wage in our community, and secure funding to expand affordable housing. Together, as mayor, we will work to keep Berkeley diverse and affordable, address our homeless crisis, raise the minimum wage, increase city revenues and promote fiscal sustainability, improve public safety, keep all debates hospital open, and fight climate change. I represent the people and the neighborhoods of Berkeley, not special interests and developers. Please join me in creating a dynamic and equitable future for our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Naomi D. Pete.
Good evening. Thank you for the invite. I haven't done anything like the others on the panel. I have not been in office at all, but I've ran for city council a couple of times back in '79 and '80. I also ran for mayor in 1982 and 1986. Of course, I didn't win because I'm sure you would have seen me by now making some policies and what have you. I feel that Berkeley is really falling apart. We have a mental and homeless issue roaming around. Maybe I shouldn't use that word, roaming around, walking around in our city streets, downtown Berkeley, which I often come to downtown Berkeley because I want to shop in Berkeley. I've lived in Berkeley for many years, since 1952, because my parents brought my brother and I here because of the school system, in which Berkeley used to have the best of everything, the best school system, the best police department, the best everything, the best people too. And the ones that are around my generation time, they're still the best people. So I just want Berkeley to have the best, be the best, not only in the state of California, but in the city of Berkeley, to make it the best in everything that we can make it to be.
Thank you. Lori Capitelli.
I want to thank the League and also thank Berkeley City College for this, letting us use this wonderful space. Berkeley is a great place. I think most of us would agree. But we also have some serious challenges. We have challenges around the affordability of housing, both rental and purchase. We have challenges on our streets with hundreds of homeless people on our streets. And another one I would point out is we have a persistent achievement gap in our schools, which we have not really been able to address. I'm running for mayor to continue to address those challenges, and I want to do that over the next 4 years. For 12 years, I've been on the city council. For 4 years before that, I was on the zoning adjustments board, and for 4 years before that, I was on the planning commission. I've met with hundreds and hundreds of my fellow citizens over those years, working on problems and trying to solve those problems. My kids were born in Berkeley. They were raised in Berkeley. They went to Berkeley schools. 2 of my grandchildren live in Berkeley. I want my grandchildren to have the same opportunities that I had and my children had growing up in this community. I also want people who work in Berkeley to have the opportunity to live in Berkeley. That's very important for me. As a former teacher, I appreciate the importance of closing that achievement gap. I believe that we need to offer every child in Berkeley access to universal preschool. One of the reasons I worked so hard on the soda tax was to provide funds to improve the health of our children. Tackling the homeless will be a difficult issue. It is a difficult issue. We have to do it with compassion and we have to do it with realism. We need to help the most vulnerable while recognizing that it is a regional issue, and the solution will come regionally, not just by Berkeley.
Thank you. Ben Gould.
Thank you to everyone who came out here tonight and to everyone who's watching at home, either live or recorded. Thanks to the Berkeley Community College for hosting this event and also to the League of Women Voters for organizing and bringing us all together. My name is Ben Gould. I'm a graduate student at UC Berkeley, earning dual degrees in public policy and environmental engineering. I'm also currently the chair of the City of Berkeley's Community Environmental Advisory Commission. As someone who both grew up here in Berkeley and recently moved back to this incredibly diverse, cultural, innovative city, it's clear to me that the biggest challenge facing Berkeley is housing affordability. We have a shortage of housing, and that's making Berkeley inaccessible for many people who would like to make a life here. Over just the past 3 years since I moved back here myself, I have personally watched rents go up by 50%. In my own building, where a studio that was renting for $1,200 a month is now going for $1,800. So something that was once on the cusp of affordability for a graduate student is now well beyond that. And to afford a studio like that, you have to make as much as a teacher. Meanwhile, the kind of housing we want to make available for our teachers, 1 or 2 bedroom apartments, maybe small single family homes, is now only available, requires the income of a software engineer. And the reason for these rising prices is very clear. We have a shortage of housing. The nonpartisan independent legislative analyst office estimates that the Bay Area underbuilt about 1 million units of housing over the last 40 years. Clearly, this is a regional problem, but Berkeley can do more as well. I believe we can build mid-rise buildings along our transit corridors to increase density and make new housing available, making it easier to find a place to live while also protecting our diversity. Not only will new housing help prevent displacement, it'll drive more money to our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which we can use to build subsidized low-income housing with even greater benefits for most vulnerable communities. So my top priority is to ensure Berkeley is a place where people of all incomes and backgrounds can find housing and feel welcome. We also need to do more to reinvest in our parks and infrastructure and protect the future of Berkeley by addressing climate change, but I'll get to those later on tonight.
Thank you. Now Mike Lee.
Good evening. My name is Michael Lee. I am a community activist and one of the organizers for First That Came for the Homeless. I want to first of all thank each and every one of you for your attendance this evening. It really shows that you care about the future of our tiny village. I'm especially appreciative of those in attendance who infrequently come downtown. I know that you were probably thinking that you were in El Salvador or in some other third world country due to the hundreds of desperate, dying people populating our dusty doorways. Let me assure you, this is Berkeley, California, United States of America. If this district's elected representative had his way, he would make the whole city look like downtown. The most important issue facing America and Berkeley is homelessness, an open, festering sore, gushing blood onto the streets of America. Their cries of their pain and suffering falling on the deaf ears of a Berkeley City Council, elected representatives who were willfully neglectful, choosing to respond either by criminalization or charity, refusing to provide a hand up and not a hand out. This policy resulted in the death of Roberto Benitez. Right now, homeless people in frustration and desperation, refusing to die in silence, have taken over the hub. We are now currently occupying with 15 tents. We're intending to try to find the services that we so desperately need. There are 2 proposals in front of City Council that would immediately reduce the homeless population by as much as 20%. In conclusion, I want to thank you so very much and wish you a safe journey home. Please be careful that you don't get bit by many of the rats that frolic in downtown Berkeley.
Thank you. Now it's time to get into the questions. We're going to start at this end again and work down, and then we'll alternate where we start as we go through the questions. So the first question for Chris Worthington. What are the most pressing issues in the city, and what is your plan to address them?
Oh, I'm glad the first one's easy. So I think it's from the previous comments by the other candidates, some of the pressing issues are quite obvious: affordable housing, homelessness. I would say public safety is right up there and rarely gets mentioned. I happen to have introduced the most practical proposals for improving public safety. I think we also have to address fiscal responsibility and economic development. I've introduced the most proposals on those. One of the biggest issues is the fact that city council meetings are a circus, which can be solved by one person. All the mayor has to do is call a special meeting whenever there's a giant controversial issue, and we all know there's going to be 100 people there. the mayor alone can call a special meeting and the public will just come for that one item and not have to sit there waiting for 3 or 4 hours.
Thank you. Jesse Arwin.
Thank you. So the most critical challenges facing Berkeley, and these are issues that I hear from when I talk to voters door to door, are the housing crisis. And not just will people that grew up in this city, your children, will people that work in this city be able to afford to live here? And I believe that if we as a city cannot ensure that our children can live here, something is wrong. That is not the Berkeley that we love. And we have to change the direction if that's the case. And so as mayor, I will work to increase not only the construction of housing, but affordable housing for people at all income levels. Put in place policies to prevent displacement, and work to increase resources to create affordable housing. Homelessness is a critical challenge. Representing downtown, I see it every single day. I think it's really a failure of our society that we have so many people sleeping on our streets. We need to pursue a regional approach to address homelessness, as well as increase housing and mental health services to effectively address the issue in our community. Infrastructure, we have crumbling streets, sidewalks, parks, facilities. We need to invest in the physical health of our city. I strongly support Measure T1, which will provide $100 million to ensure that we can invest in our infrastructure.
Thank you. Naomi D. Pete.
I believe that the main the crisis is the people that are on the city council right now, along with the homelessness, the mental people that are on our streets of Berkeley, because I've been approached by a mental person on the street, and it was very frightening and almost attacked me. And it's just so happened my son was with me. So I called on the the mayor's office, and they told me, well, that person didn't take their medicine. Oh, wow. But there's other issues too. We're not covering all of Berkeley. You have South Berkeley, you have West Berkeley, you have North Berkeley, you have the hills, and the downtown areas. So you really, with this 1 minute, you don't have time to just explain everything you need to say about all these areas. But I want to also include all their areas, all their concerns, and try to make Berkeley more presentable to people who visit here.
Thank you. Lori Capitelli.
Well, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I think housing affordability and the homeless situation are critical issues that we need to address. I also believe that they need to be addressed regionally. We do not have the resources alone in this community to deal with the homeless on our streets. In terms of our housing, we went through 40 years of building almost no housing in this community. It was only 10 or 12 years ago that we began to build housing. I believe in building housing along our transportation corridors, in the downtown, around transportation hubs, and I think you'll see that the downtown plan, which was opposed by many people on the council, but is going into effect, is bringing that population to the downtown. We are creating a new neighborhood in the downtown. We are creating a new neighborhood down at 4th and 5th Street and University. And those are important places. The population of Berkeley today is 5,000 less than it was when I came here in 1965. 5,000 less.
Thank you. Ben Gould.
I'm excited to be one of those residents in the new neighborhood in downtown, and I would disagree with Mike Lee's portrayal of it. I think it's a wonderful place to live. Our top 3 issues in Berkeley are housing affordability, a need to reinvest in our parks and infrastructure, and to expand our issues to fight climate change and address environmental sustainability. For housing affordability, we can rezone to make it easier to subdivide your home or add accessory dwelling units, increasing density without having to build new construction. We can also raise height limits around transit and pass Measure U1 and find other funding sources for affordable low-income housing. For parks and infrastructure, we can pass Measure T1 to place a $100 million bond, make $100 million available for reinvesting in our infrastructure. And we can also develop a 30-year plan to really tackle the $500 million in deferred maintenance the city has. For climate change and environmental issues, we can address natural gas, which accounts for more than 1/3 of our city's CO2 emissions, by phasing out the use of natural gas for cooking, for heating, for water heating, and so forth, and use alternative clean energy sources for that. And we can also expand biking and transit in Berkeley, where more people are interested but afraid to bike than any other major city.
Thank you. Mike Lee.
As I said before, we have a very much of a homeless crisis, and I do agree that we are going to have to solve it on a regional basis, but Berkeley must lead the way. There are two proposals right now on City Council desk that they have not yet picked up. I think the number one thing when we're talking about overall the city itself, everything comes back to fiscal responsibility. City currently right now is $1 billion in debt. We're underfunded in two major areas. We have to deal with that. We cannot afford to be buying $200,000 patch trucks. Sorry, instead of buying two of those, let's buy one. Let's say get 200,000, roll that money over and start to solve homelessness. Let's start to build some housing. We have the revenue, we have the resources, but we are not being fiscally responsible. What it is right now is basically a policy that I consider rob Peter to pay Paul.
Thank you. And the second question, we will start with Jesse Arreguin. And the question is, what actions would you propose to materially increase the housing stock for working people?
Thank you for that question. For the past 14 years, I've been a leader in creating affordable housing in Berkeley. When I served on the Housing Commission, I was involved in efforts to construct several hundred units of affordable housing along our transportation corridors, including the David Brower Center in our downtown. And I think the most critical challenge that we face in creating affordable housing is a lack of resources. And so there are two measures on the ballot, Measure A1 and Measure U1, which will provide needed funding for Berkeley to be able to increase affordable housing. We have about $36 million in requests. We have $3 million in our Housing Trust Fund. So I'll work to not only increase our inclusionary requirements, secure more money for affordable housing, not just locally, but on a regional and statewide level, but work to prevent displacement, to keep people in their homes by increasing emergency rental assistance, so people who are facing eviction can stay housed, and by not just building new affordable housing, but acquiring existing multi-unit buildings to preserve affordability. We need to do more to address the displacement crisis because it is changing the face of our city. We can prevent evictions and keep Berkeley diverse and affordable.
Thank you. Naomi D. Beat.
This is really not my experience enough to talk on this very eloquently, but I understand that, that perhaps they do need more affordable housing, and really that's all we've been talking about is affordable housing. So I hope that whoever gets on becomes a mayor and the city council and put together, that they will all work together to bring about a good change for Berkeley, for those who are in need of housing, those who've been displaced. And please don't forget the areas that displacement is going on, and not to just concentrate on downtown Berkeley. Like I said, there you have South Berkeley, you have West Berkeley, you have North Berkeley. So I think if you try to concentrate on those areas also and give their input and see what they would like for themselves, and the best of luck with this.
Thank you. Laurie Capitelli.
So I have moved forward already in a couple of areas. One with the Berkeley Unified School District identifying their surplus property and underutilized property to identify it for potential housing for teachers. We've also instructed the city manager to bring us a list of the surplus or underutilized properties that the city owns that Caltrans might own. We need to be aggressive in this area. And you have to remember that creating a housing unit in Berkeley takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So something that we might approve today will be 3 to 5 years away. I introduced legislation to make it easier to get approval on affordable housing projects. And that's going through the system also. I also want to say that we have never built a unit in this city or offered a unit in this city to somebody with a middle income, a teacher, a librarian, a social worker. Not one in the last 20 years.
Thank you. Ben Gould.
Berkeley has around 49,000 units of housing currently. So to materially increase the housing stock for working people, we're going to require several thousand more units at least. Given that new construction generally costs about $500,000 per unit, and even when you leverage multipliers for affordable low-income housing, it comes out to about $125,000 that the city needs to raise to build 1 unit of low-income housing. It's clear that we can't increase affordable housing without also increasing market rate housing significantly. Fortunately, we have plenty of room for that. If we build 6-story buildings along our priority development areas, South Shattuck and Adeline, University and San Pablo, we can house 10 or 13,000 new units of housing and meet demand easily. There's plenty more room on Telegraph, College, North Shattuck and Sacramento Street, Solano as well. We can also work with the University of California to build more student housing and help house low-income undergraduate students and get them off of the rental market and make more housing available that way as well.
Thank you. Mike Lee.
When we talk about housing policy within this city, basically we're locked focused on build, luxury rate housing, affordable housing. And the areas that we are not taking a look at, or aggressively enough, I feel, are both acquisition and rehabilitation of existing properties. There is a move, as Councilmember Capitelli said, for quite some time now for us to identify surplus property. The other thing that I want to see basically within this whole thing is we need to start thinking about forming a strategic partnership between the city, between nonprofit housing developers, between the Berkeley Housing Authority, and so that we can sit down and we can actually have a short, a medium, and a long-range goal of exactly how are we going to create this. When we talk about solely a housing policy focused on only building, again, as Councilmember Capitelli, it's a 3 to 5 year process. We need housing now. We need to try to cut that.
Thank you. Chris Worthington.
Well, first and foremost, we need to reform our zoning ordinance. Much of that 3 to 5 year delay is consistently blamed on the public process at the zoning board and the city council, but those two parts of the process only take a few months, going through the bureaucracy and having the staff figuring out which part of a contradictory ordinance applies and which doesn't when they say opposite things. Those kinds of delays actually cause more delay than the entire public process put together. Secondarily, beyond the staff delay from the confusion and contradictions of the zoning ordinance, I introduced 49 specific proposals addressing affordable housing. Most of them were delayed. 27 of them were delayed for 7 months. Why were they delayed by the city council? At the end of that 7 months, 23 out of those 27 were unanimously approved to be studied in the plan, but it was supposed to be a short-term action plan, and 7 months was wasted in the delay.
Thank you. The next question, we will begin with Naomi D. Pete. And the question is, what actions would you propose to improve the city-university interface?
Well, that's a tough one. I'm not familiar with the University of California interface, so I probably might have to pass, but I really don't know anything about it. And perhaps you're probably saying, well, what are you running for mayor for if you don't know anything about California infrastructure? But that's okay. I feel like we are, from what I'm knowledge of knowing Berkeley and living in Berkeley most of my life, it seemed like it's an ongoing battle of fighting between the Berkeley students and, not Berkeley students and the Cal and the city of Berkeley. So, I'm a resident of Berkeley, not a resident of the university. So I'd like to concentrate more on my issues and try to, if I was mayor, I would try to work with whatever we need to work with to try to come to some conclusions and good deals, but it's an ongoing battle, I understand, going on between the university.
Thank you. Laurie Capitelli.
Well, whether we like it or not, in many ways, the university is exempt from most of our rules, and that's something we have to live with. If we want to change it, we need to go to the legislature, and I would suggest that we probably sit down with the legislature and talk about where we could make adjustments so that we do have some control. When I listen to the question, I hear interface, and I'm thinking, are we talking about the social political interface, or are we talking about the physical interface? But in terms of the political interface, I think any mayor needs to work regularly with the chancellor and others at the university to understand what's going on. Also, the long-range development plan, the LRDP, expires in 2020, which means that the next mayor will be negotiating with the university in terms of the impact of the next long-range development plan will have on the city as well as the university. When the university purchases a piece of land, when they build a building, it comes off the tax rolls. I think the university needs to make an adjustment there in order to cover part of its fair share.
Thank you. Ben Gould.
So there are a number of different groups at UC Berkeley who relationships need to be improved with. There's administration, that's like the long-range development plan and new construction and so forth. Those are the student body, both undergraduates and graduate students, as well as faculty and staff. If elected, I'll probably be the only person on city council in the history of Berkeley who have actually served on UC Berkeley student government, because I worked in the graduate assembly last year. And so I think that's going to be helpful for improving those open lines of communication. I know City Council is currently working with the External Affairs Vice President of both the ASUC and the Graduate Assembly to create a 4x4 committee so that we can have members of council regularly meeting with members of graduates of the student governments and also with administration to help create these open lines of dialogue and communication that we really need in order to have an effective city-university interface. I think when we were thinking about the long-range development plan with the university in the future, it's important to think about what the community wants and what the university wants. I know student housing is a big issue for students and the community as well, and we can do more to help the university do that.
Thank you. Mike Lee.
Improve the interface. That's a very good question because it's not been raised at all. One of the things that needs to happen is we need a rules change. The University of California, as Councilmember Capitelli pointed out, every time they have a building, they can go ahead and sublease some of that space, and they still aren't subject to taxes. I think that we need to go back and we need to look at every single rule and to make them pay their fair share. As far as the long-range development plan that expires in 2020, the answer to that is community. As mayor, I would go to the community and we're going to sit down and we're going to figure out how do we improve relations with the university, because the long-range development plan is headed for South Berkeley. And I'm going to tell the regents right now, come on with it, because you're going to run into us as Friends of Adeline.
Thank you. Chris Worthington.
I think the first thing to understand about the city-university relationship is faculty, staff, and students generally agree with the people of Berkeley because many of them are the people of Berkeley, and they have a very different point of view than the UC administration. So we need to build coalitions with the faculty, staff, and students. There are UC-related institutions like the Berkeley Project and the Suitcase Clinic. They've applied to the city for funding. The Berkeley Project brings thousands of volunteers to help the city. The Suitcase Clinic helps so many people on a very cost-effective basis. They've asked the city to be funded in our regular nonprofit funding, and they've been rejected for like 5,000 or 10,000. They bring thousands of volunteers to the city. I think the city is penny wise and pound foolish. Sewer and capital repairs. When you pay your sewer bills, you're paying for UC Berkeley's capital repairs of their sewers, because the majority of the city council made that deal in the last long-range development plan. I can't think of any other city in the state of California that has to pay that except Berkeley. And finally, Berkeley City College. We need to not just be UC Berkeley, but also work with Berkeley City College, has almost as many students.
Thank you. Jesse Arogwin.
Thank you. So I think there's sort of two areas where there's opportunity for improvement. One is the university is not only one of the largest employers in the region, but is engaged in incredible academic and work and research. And so there are opportunities to further collaborate with the university to address some of the challenges that we're facing as a city, our climate crisis, our housing crisis, our homeless crisis. And so we need to better foster those relationships with the city and university and promote more collaboration. But in addition, we need to ensure that whoever's mayor is getting the best deal possible for our city. 10 years ago, the majority of the city council negotiated a deal with the university, which resulted in millions and millions of dollars less from the university to address fiscal impacts. As mayor, I will work with the next chancellor to negotiate a better deal for the citizens of Berkeley that adequately compensates the people of Berkeley for the fiscal impacts the university creates on the city. We also need to address the student housing crisis, which also affects our larger housing market as well.
Thank you. The next question will begin with Lori Capitelli. What should Berkeley do about short-term rentals, STRs? What should be encouraged? What should be restricted, limited, or forbidden?
Well, short-term rentals are already illegal in Berkeley. We just don't enforce the law as we don't enforce so many of our other laws. They're enforced basically on a complaint-driven basis. When we passed the accessory dwelling unit amendment to the zoning ordinance a year ago, we said you cannot use an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, for short-term rental. It must be for permanent housing, not for, and I support that. I support that policy. The council will be grappling with the issue of people who have been using some of their A unit for short-term rentals. And I am generally opposed to that. I'm also totally opposed to people who have bought triplexes, fourplexes, et cetera, and turned them into mini hotels. That is wrong. We need that housing for long-term tenancy, and we need to make sure that that happens.
Thank you. Ben Gould.
I think short-term rentals are sort of an exciting opportunity to welcome visitors to our city, but I also want to recognize the impacts they have on communities and also our housing stock. I don't think it should be forbidden in any case specifically, but I do think it should be restricted so that we don't have people, like Capitelli said, buying duplexes or triplexes or even apartment buildings and renting out units consistently. I think if somebody lives in a place and they're going out of town for a while, they should be able to rent it. If they have a spare bedroom, they should be able to rent that. I don't see any problem with renting accessory dwelling units periodically, but I think we want to make sure that our housing is available for housing first and foremost, and short-term rentals on the side if needed when they can't find a tenant for a while.
Thank you. Mike Lee.
I join with Councilmember Capitelli in absolute opposition to short-term rentals because of the fact of the potential damage they do to our housing stock. We need that stock for our homeless people, for our teachers, for our firefighters, and our police. Period. Ended. Right now, this council over the last year has been grappling over Airbnb. When we talk about short-term rentals and ADUs, the biggest question becomes, what do you do to ensure that those units are not being turned into Airbnb, those 3 and 4 and sometimes 6 and 8 unit apartment buildings? So I stand absolutely in opposition to short-term rentals.
Thank you. Chris Worthington.
Every single day, the city of Berkeley is losing affordable housing, and the city of Berkeley is losing money because the city council has failed to adopt short-term rental regulations. Just like they've delayed the 49 affordable housing proposals that I introduced a proposal 2.5 years ago to have a short-term rental ordinance and fee. The city has lost millions of dollars by not adopting Jesse Arreguin's affordable housing proposals 4 years ago. They've lost almost $2 million by not adopting a short-term rental regulation and fee. And we actually got the first reading adopted, and then it came back, and because they wanted to make some minor changes, they said, well, let's just delay the whole thing. We could adopt this at the very next council meeting, have a fee in place, the city'd be getting almost $1 million a year coming in, and we're losing it because of the same attitude on the part of the city council of delay, 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 and not addressing these important issues.
Thank you. Jesse Arreguin.
Well, as Councilmember Worthington said, the city council actually adopted an ordinance, and then due to the actual pressure from Airbnb, backed off on actually taking final action on that ordinance. We could have already legalized short-term rentals in the city of Berkeley and have policies to prevent the removal of our housing stock and gotten the tax revenue to address the many needs that we have discussed as a community. We definitely need to legalize short-term rentals, but we need to balance allowing this economy with preventing the loss of housing in our community. There are actual whole buildings where units are being used as hotel rooms. And we cannot let that happen right now when we are in a dire housing crisis. So I've actually worked with the mayor and Councilmember Drosty on crafting a proposal that balances the need to allow short-term rentals and or sort of allow this new economy to exist and prevent the loss of housing. We can do both, and we need to make sure that whatever policy we adopt, that we prioritize preserving our housing stock.
Thank you. Do you want me to Pete?
Listening to the others, I feel like that maybe this short term is not the thing to do. And once again, here we go with the city council. So they're the one who's supposed to be solving all these issues and problems. So I think once you go back, it don't look like they're going to solve it. So I probably would, if I was become mayor, I would probably look at this more closely and try to figure out what is best for the city on this issue. But it sounds like I wouldn't approve of the short term.
Thank you. The next question, we will begin with Ben Gould. Public safety is a big issue in all cities in the Bay Area and in Berkeley. How do you define public safety, and what is your stance in supporting all first responders?
Sorry, what was the last part of that question?
How do you define public safety, and what is your stance in supporting all first responders?
So I think public safety is really about feeling safe in your community, feeling safe to go outside, feeling safe in your own property, feeling safe from attacks or threats. And so I think it's important to ensure that everyone in our community feels welcomed and they can be a part of it and they can make it home. And as far as my stance on all first responders goes, I think our fire and police do excellent jobs right now. I think we can also look carefully at what jobs we're asking police officers to do, especially when it comes to mental health services, for example, and figure out if we can find new ways to provide the same sort of support and service that we want for Berkeley residents by better allocating those resources. Many police calls right now go to mental health services, or go to address mental health issues, and they really need mental health service professionals to do that.
Thank you. Mike Lee.
I define public safety as the ability to walk down to the 7-Eleven at 3 a.m. and not really have to worry about it, sort of thing. Public safety, to me, is one of the most crucial issues here and as part of our campaign. It was something that was brought to our attention. One of the things that we've started to talk about was community-oriented police, going back to walking police officers. We've already said publicly that we would like to investigate the possibility of reinstituting a mounted patrol in downtown, which is going to create two things: increase public safety and also give people from all over the Bay Area to come and see our mounted patrol. Kids love horses. It's a natural tourist attraction. We can build around that, plus we can keep downtown a little safer. But it does come down to community-oriented policing, especially in South Berkeley.
Thank you. Chris Worthington.
Well, I think first we have to acknowledge that 35% of Berkeley Police Department calls had to do with mental health. So that's a public safety issue as well as a homeless issue. And we need to not have our police spending 1/3 of their time dealing with this. We need mental health professionals dealing with mental health issues. That will free up the police to actually do things that we really need to do, like having police officers doing foot patrols and bike patrols in our commercial districts. We need to expand the city's use of social media to communicate with the public and to help the public communicate with each other about crisis situations. We need to make permanent our 4th ambulance to support the safety of our public's health. We need to fight to save Alta Bates Hospital, and we need police accountability reform.
Thank you. Jesse Ottergreen.
Well, public safety is honestly one of the critical issues facing our community, and it's very multifaceted. First of all, our fire and police resources are stretched very thin. We have thousands of more people coming to Berkeley. Our actual fire department needs not only a 4th ambulance, but a 5th ambulance to address the call volume that they're receiving. So we need to find a way to not only increase resources for our fire and emergency response, but we also need to expand our police force. There's one police officer patrolling one large beat in the Berkeley Hills. So if something happens, it takes longer for that person to respond and to address crime that's happening in the community. And we know that crime is up. So we need to expand fire and police resources. We should look at something that other communities are doing, a fire impact fee. We should look at how university can help contribute to that need. Also, the closure of Alta Bates is a major public safety issue. I will fight to keep Alta Bates Hospital open. And disaster preparedness. We are straddling the Hayward Fault. We know there's a major fire that's going to happen. We need to expand resources for disaster preparedness throughout the city so our community is prepared.
Thank you. Naomi D. Beat.
Public safety means to me, for me being able to come down, walk down the street to the bus stop by being a senior and be able to not be afraid of somebody's going to maybe grab my purse or hit me or something like that. And coming downtown also, it's very frightening at times to come into Berkeley downtown and people are walking around and some are hollering at themselves and hollering at you too. So I believe, to me, the Berkeley police are doing a good job. I've seen them being very kind to a person who was very stressed out on the streets of Berkeley, and they were very kind and patient with that person, getting them off the street. So they need to work. I approve. I like the idea of police walking the beat if they're going to do that. And officer, I want to make sure.
You can finish your sentence.
No, I just want to make sure that South Berkeley, I heard, was at a meeting last night, and they're concerned about lighting. So lighting is a very important issue throughout, if not just South Berkeley, other areas where they need lighting for other people to walk through.
Thank you. And now, Ms. Capitelli.
You know, I've met probably with 40 different groups over the last couple of months in their homes during the evening. And it's interesting to think about asking those folks to define public safety. If you were in North Berkeley, public safety would be defined as, I don't want somebody breaking into my car. I don't want somebody walking down the street and seeing which doors are open and cleaning out coin boxes in the boot. When I was down in South Berkeley at Sacramento and 61st, the question that comes to mind is, how do I get rid of that crack dealer that's standing right now, right outside the front window on the corner? When do I get to have a Saturday night when I don't hear gunshots? So you've got two really divergent visions of public safety. I think we need to deal with both of them. But one of the reasons why we put so many resources in South Berkeley, I can finish the sentence. One of the reasons why we put more resources in South Berkeley is because that's where those resources are needed. I want to see policemen get out of their cars and interact with the community and get to know their community.
Thank you. The next question goes first to Mike Lee. How do you propose to balance development with desire of neighborhoods to retain the neighborhood atmosphere?
I don't believe that there's a balance. I'm a community activist and a defender of the community. My old thing is that when we're talking about development, especially in South Berkeley, it is my opinion that we have to come to the community and get their approval before building. It's a privilege to build in Berkeley. We have to stop giving developers all of these rebates and discounts, sort of thing. But the decision about what type of housing or what type of buildings to locate has to involve the community. Their opinion must be included, which presently it's not, to my satisfaction.
Thank you. Chris Worthington.
Well, I think Mike Lee sort of hit on one piece of this. Part of the lack of faith of the public in the city in relation to the balance of development, when the city council gives one developer like $10 million in fee reductions in one particular project, that isn't the same possible fee reductions, that the same magnitude are not available to the other developers, it creates a loss of faith in the city. I think a large part of the debates in Berkeley is about how tall buildings are going to be. I personally couldn't care less how tall the buildings are. I know that's a controversial thing to say, but it doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is how green is the building and how much affordable housing is going to be a part of it. And so I think, people screaming at each other about should there be 1 tall building, 5 tall buildings, 10 tall buildings, the size of the buildings is not what matters. What matters is, are they green? Are they affordable? Do they meet, the needs of the people of Berkeley?
Thank you. Jesse, all right, Green.
Thank you. So part of what makes Berkeley special are our neighborhoods. We have such incredible neighborhoods throughout our city, but our neighborhoods are seeing major challenges. We're seeing development that is coming into our neighborhoods that is not sensitive to the character of those neighborhoods, it's not contextual. We're seeing housing that is out of the price range of most people that live in the city. The people that grew up here can't afford the housing that's built. One project, I think the rent for a 3-bedroom apartment was $6,000 a month. And so the question fundamentally is, how will we grow as a city in a way that preserves what makes Berkeley special? And I believe we do not need to sacrifice the character of our neighborhoods to address our housing crisis. We can create more housing in a way that is sensitive to the character of our neighborhoods. I've been a strong advocate on the City Council and on the Zoning Adjustments Board for balancing the need for growth with preserving the character of our neighborhoods. We can grow, we can change, but we need to preserve the quality of life of our neighborhoods.
Thank you. Laurie D. Beat.
On this issue, I would definitely need all the help I need throughout the community, each neighborhood, trying to pull their people together, get their input and what need to be done that can relate to them in their area. I hope that you're looking at the city council now, and of course your future mayor, but really see what they're doing. I was at a meeting and all they were doing was arguing with each other and cutting each other down. So this issue here, what I'm trying to say is I want to make sure we include everybody, the South Berkeley, West Berkeley, North Berkeley, the Hills, and get everybody's input into how to make a better neighborhood.
Thank you. Laurie Capitelli.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear some of the comments from the panel tonight. I think that number one, it is not a zero-sum game. Developing housing in the downtown does not damage North Shattuck, does not damage the Elmwood, does not damage the Adeline corridor. In fact, it enriches all of our lives. For most of us, we avoided the downtown for many years. It's only been in the last 4 or 5 years that people have started thinking about going downtown because it's an active place. The theater district is successful, there are restaurants all over the place, and there is housing. The more people that come to the downtown, the livelier the downtown will be. And that doesn't damage the neighborhoods. So I think that's number one. Number two, it fits in all of us, or actually 80% of us, supported Berkeley's climate action plan. It is good for our climate action plan to focus people around transit hubs, around BART, around AC lines. And that's a key, and that's why the downtown is going to be a success.
Thank you. Ben Gould.
Well, I think one of the challenges is that we can't preserve neighborhood character without development because, like we're seeing, many of the existing housing is also becoming unaffordable for people in that neighborhood. And so if we don't build new housing to address the rising housing prices, we will see neighborhoods become more and more exclusive, white, upper class, and that won't preserve the character of the people who had been living there previously. I think downtown is a great place to look at this because downtown isn't a neighborhood that wants to be preserved. We want a changing neighborhood in downtown. I agree with Councilmember Worthington's proposal to eliminate height requirements in downtown. I think it'd be great to have taller buildings there. And I think, it's also not a zero-sum game. Building housing in the downtown, near transit, helps create new neighborhoods and add vibrancy to Berkeley without damaging the single-family character or low-density qualities of other neighborhoods. I think it's also important to recognize that many of the neighborhoods we have in Berkeley are actually more diverse and dense and tall than they actually are currently allowed under current zoning. I'll have to stop there.
Thank you.